begin our historic footage with a very familiar building on the square, the Medina Fire Engine House. We believe this is shot in 1917. You'll notice a very different look to the doors. And let's take a look at what comes out of our historic engine house. This first vehicle is an engine-driven Halleck chemical truck built right here in Medina, Ohio. And it's pulling its hose cart with 500 feet of hose. Down the street it goes. This is going west on West Washington. Medina's principal fire engine of the time was bought by the village in 1877. This is a number 4 Silsby rotary steam fire engine. Also purchased were 500 feet of hose. Steam power provided the pressure for the water streams that put out the fires here in Medina. At this time, this vehicle was over 40 years old. Also, a part of the fire department was this cart, was hoses and materials, and the ladder wagon. These were light enough and mobile enough that they could be pushed and pulled by firefighters to wherever the fire might be. All of this footage was filmed intentionally as a demonstration of the fire department and how it operated. This house on the corner of Elmwood and West Washington is still there today, and it was used to demonstrate how the fire department reacted to a fire. Climbing up the ladder, the extension ladder that they had brought, and sending up the hose, and there goes the stream of water from the Silsby pumper. That Halleck engine that we saw in the very beginning was one of only 22 that were built right here in Medina. The horses had been separated from the steam engine, partly due to noise and heat, but also because embers might kick out and land on the horses and cause them to be spooked. Notice the pressure produced by this fine old engine. This is original footage from a key moment in Medina's history, and not only that, but the history of the world. On November 11th, 1919, the greatest day for all the world, the youth and pride of Medina were scattered over the fields of France in the world's conflict. It is in honor of the boys of our nation that we shall remember this day forever. This is the first Armistice Day parade that happened here in Medina, a tribute to those who had given all that we might enjoy peace. These are some of the local veterans. Notice the park in the background with the Cooley Fountain. Incredible growth during the park at this time in history. The elm trees that were there had been planted during the Civil War. Many of these young men had been overseas and had now safely returned. They might have started their journey in small tents that were actually in the public square park. They were kept there until the troop train arrived that would take them east to leave from the ports of the United States, heading across the Atlantic to the war effort. This was kind of a humorous thing that was put together just as a part of the video. The guys were back and they were having fun, and so we have a dice game. Even after war, they were ready to mug for the cameras. The horses lead the parade around the corner, off of Liberty and in front of the old historic courthouse. Local dignitaries, and then, of course, the Medina Community Band, founded in 1859, here already 60 years old. Civil War veterans, veterans of the Spanish-American War, and finally the returning young men from World War I. Garfield School had been constructed in 1912. And here is the student body of the Garfield Elementary and Middle School at the time. Clearly a staged performance, but this is a wonderful look at the children of the day as they march out of Garfield in the background. Of course, Garfield was the same place it is today, but down the street on North Broadway was a primary school. 4 rooms, 4 classrooms, each one holding about 50 children. And here they come out of the primary school that was located where the county administration building is today. Teachers carefully arranging them, and there go our last ones. And out they go to the area behind the primary school. These are the high school boys. The high school was the Lincoln Building, which was on the corner of South Broadway and Smith Road. You see the library in the back there over their shoulders in the corner. This, we believe, was shot in the early 1920s, but it could have been the late teens. The fact that they're marching, it may have had something to do with the war and the war effort. The girls, of course, many uniformed, not all, but many. You see the Garfield there behind them, the library in the corner. More boys marching, less uniformed, and a little bit younger, and now all of them marching forward. You see the Christian church there with its peaked roof, and you're going to see the Lincoln Building come into view here. That is the high school that was built way back in 1872. This, we believe, is footage of an auction due to a bankruptcy possibly, or an eviction. This gentleman is not happy about it. As you'll see in a moment, he's very reluctant to lose his property. Happier times were further west, as we see the workers of the Root Company either heading home or heading in, depending on which direction. But here they're on break, enjoying a little bit of a break from inside the AI Root factory, having a good time, mugging for the cameras, as people always seem to do. Even the ladies in the office across the street were in the picture. Baseball was huge, especially in the 20s. Of course, the Indians won the World Series in 1920, and the Medina High School baseball team was very much active and was thrilled to be playing the national sport of the time. This is the Princess Theater, right opposite the old courthouse. It was built in 1913, and it was the principal theater for all of the silent movies that came out during that era and beyond. In 1922, the theater started showing some comedies called the Our Gang series. It was about a group of kids, mainly in the city, who just had all kinds of adventures and fun kinds of things that they did. Medina might have had its own Our Gang. Here we are, just down the street on Liberty, with a group of young children from Medina, having a nice weekend. The Our Gang comedies were very popular, and in 1931, they had a new star arrive. He was only 3 years old, and his name was George McFarland. He quickly picked up the nickname Spanky, and he became one of the principal actors during the Our Gang comedies in the 1930s. Somewhere in the mid-30s, 35 or 36, he was on a publicity tour, and he stayed overnight in the American House Hotel right here in Medina. The next day, the kids of Medina came to see this famous star. We think he's eating his lunch and mugging for the cameras down at Tony Horvath's Candy Kitchen, because you can see the sweet shop label on the window frame. They also had food in addition to candy and sweets, and here's Spanky playing with his sandwich and well aware of all his audience outside the window. He would later go on to do the voices of these characters when they converted all this into television material for the Little Rascals films. But here he is right here in Medina, enjoying a meal and about to go out and be among his public, walking in the park with a little girl who we think was supposed to interact with him in some way. She looks kind of nervous, and he finally just shakes her hand and in his car, and off he goes down the road to fame and fortune. Baseball wasn't only played by the high school, it was also played by just about everyone. And it was a very popular thing for family reunions. This particular ball diamond was right behind Garfield Elementary. You see Garfield there, and you see also the Christian church, the 1924 brand new Christian church. There were bleachers. This was a ball diamond right here in the middle of Medina, and it was used by many, many people, as well as children, to play this favorite sport. Underhand pitching, but it was still baseball. It was warm. This family's reunion is always in August, and we can guess that's why it was so warm for that gentleman. It is a reunion that is still held today in August in Medina by this family. That's one of the patriarchs, Earl Gibbs, who had a dealership in Medina at the bottom of Town Hill. He had a couple of brothers, and of course the next generations were on their way. But family reunions like this were very common. Many families in Medina had these during every year, and it was always an exciting event to get everyone together. This is Ed Gibbs, and we'll see him in our last video of this particular showing when we get back to a very unusual video we have of Medina. There's the church, the Christian church, and Garfield, and oh, a long fall. The church owned all of that land and eventually sold it to the school. This flood was in 1939. Champion Creek overflowed. Notice the silos in the background along the railroad tracks. There were many of those kinds of places along the tracks where the trains could pick up grain and drop off other materials. See the bridge at Elmwood right there? Here we have people sweeping out their businesses on West Smith Road. This is the Medina Granite and Marble Works, and that's Charles Lawrence Sr., the owner, cleaning up the monuments after this historic flood in 1939. If you watch as this plank is pulled out of Champion Creek, if you look over that corner, in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see the Union House Hotel, which was torn down in the late 1940s. Of course, just like today, people drive their cars through the floods. The kids were running around. The water has already started receding here. But downstream, it was continuing to flow. Of course, Champion Creek runs through Montville Township and is named for the original owners of Montville Township, Henry Champion and his son Aristarchus Champion, who were part owners of the Western Reserve. Here you see it running into the Rocky River, and the river itself, of course, fed by many other tributaries, is filling the entire valley. That's the Chandler Farm in the background. See the water coming up over the road. It's beginning to recede a little bit here. But now, and this is later when it's picked up some more. That's Charles Clark running through the water. And in a moment, you're going to see Charlie's sister, Helen. You perhaps know her better by her married name, Helen Waite. This fire was in 1935, and this is the Farmers Exchange building at the time. If you asked firefighters of the time, they would tell you that grain dust was just as flammable and hard to put out as gasoline. There have been many fires of the grain elevators throughout Medina's history, going all the way back into the 1800s. But this one completely destroyed the then Farmers Exchange. And it was not the first time that this Farmers Exchange had been destroyed by fire. Completely out of control, there was little that any department could have done to save the building. But of course, once the fire was out and the land was cleared, rebuilding could occur. And here you see the Farmers Exchange with its unique, iconic brickwork that we know today, being built in 1937 when it reopened for business. This is the old post office that was built in 1924. And here we're going to take a little tour around Medina during the 1930s. That's the theater that opened in 1937. You see, the Princess Theater has already been changed to another business. It's gone out of business. The Buckeye Diner, that today is the Amuse Euro Bistro, at least in that spot. Ohio Edison was where Marie's Cafe is today. And this is Medina in the 30s, looking east on Liberty Street toward the church and the courthouse. The American House Hotel, founded in 1830. The park. Notice the brick streets. And this, of course, is the high school, the new high school, that today is the county administration building. And now our videos move into the late 1940s and early 1950s. The Medina Community Hospital in 1942, the Chamber of Commerce started a fundraiser. They bought the Widener home on Route 18, and the brand new hospital was dedicated in October of 1944. Around 1948 or 49, people were looking forward to roller skating at the skate land that was being built out on near Fenn Road and 42 North. But a tornado came through just as construction really was ending, and completely leveled the place almost everything to the ground. As you see, in many cases, it's down to the concrete floor. People were very excited about the skate land. Roller skating was huge at this time throughout the country. Everything from roller derbies to just local fun skating. And so the people of the community, the insurance didn't cover everything. They gathered money together. They donated to the owner of this facility. They did fundraisers. And eventually, Medina's skate land opened up. And of course, in the background, you see traffic on Route 42, the main route between Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati, the 3C highway, long before 71 ever existed. Medina was still getting most of its goods by train during the 1940s and early 50s. This station was at the foot of Town Hill on the other side of Champion Creek, west of where Busy Bee Muffler is today. And goods would come in and be unloaded by hand for the most part. Here's the station master. And he had a big responsibility, not only to keep track of everything, but also to keep everything safe. In addition to the station master, you also had the freight master, and you'll know that he is carrying a sidearm. There were still train robberies or robberies of train stations during this time, and so the freight master was responsible for what was brought in, and sometimes that meant that you needed to be prepared. This, of course, is the Methodist Church. The Union Hotel is long gone by now. The white building is the YWCA. The Greyhound bus station was on West Washington Street. Today, that is the bookstore. Bus travel was very important during the 1950s, as it had been for many years in the country. New modern buses carried people all over the country. Medina ran a regular schedule of bus trips that would either connect you to someplace or take you directly wherever you wanted to go. A friendly bus driver was there to help you get situated, the captain of the roadway. These are just images of Medina in the late 40s and early 50s around the square. This was actually a constable police station that was in the park. And it was a place where the police could go and stand, and this is Officer Lewis. Of course, the Cooley Fountain had been installed in 1907 and still provided local businessmen with a cool drink. Notice the overgrowth in the park. From the 1950s, we jump ahead to Medina's Sesquicentennial celebration in 1968. The whole community became involved in this as we celebrated our 150th birthday. Notice the fire escape on the side of the bank. The cars had changed dramatically since the late 40s and 50s. They'd certainly gotten much larger. The events of the Sesquicentennial happened around a period of 1 week. They began with Church Day, then Kids Day, Teen Day, Senior Citizens Day, Old-Fashioned Bargain Day, Industry Day, Homecoming Day, and Medina Day. This was from June 23rd through June 30th. Sesquicentennial headquarters was on Liberty Street, over near where the Princess Theater had been. And they had all kinds of memorabilia for sale in the headquarters, as well as many other things, information about the events. It was a popular place to go. Many groups and organizations were involved. The Medina Recreation Department, the Chamber, the Historical Society. There's Hale's Diner and Restaurant, which replaced the Buckeye Diner. That's the bandstand that had recently been installed in the Uptown Park. Temporary benches and seating. Notice the firehouse in the back there. It had just been painted in 1968 as a part of Medina's restoration. There's Cool Beans, which was a Revco drugstore. The iconic Whitey's Army-Navy store, where Courthouse Pizza is today. The oldest building in Medina. Many of the storefronts had displays of historic items. See, the American House Hotel is gone, 1954. This display was of historic weapons, if you will, going back to primitive weapons and all kinds of firearms as well. Other groups involved were the JCs, the YWCA, the Guiding Stars, the Barber Shoppers. How about these prices? 49 cents a pound for ground beef. Postcards were for sale of historic images of Medina. This is a well-known location. High's office supply. The Lions, the Walton League, the firemen, all kinds of groups were involved. Longacre Furniture Store had this incredible collection from J. Carl Householder. These are vintage gramophones and Edison players. Some amazing megaphone colors that are a part of this incredible collection. People of the time got tremendously involved in this one week. There were lots of people that were not only doing displays like this, but many families put together costumes that were old-fashioned, as you'll see in pictures later on. Rickard's Bakery and Grocery Store featured their baked goods right in the front window. They look good even today. Ziegler's Department Store had a display of not only old-fashioned dresses, but an incredible display of old-fashioned shoes and parasols and other items from our history. There's Harold Ziegler himself. Of course, today Ziegler's is part of Town Square Commons and the Honeybee Bakery Shop, the furniture store. There's some shoes you might like to try on. There are even wooden shoes here in the window. This is an interesting display of historic footwear. Rapp's Jewelry Store was next door, and they had installed this display case in the brick wall in the front. And of course, these were items probably from an estate sale, but the window in this display was bulletproof. One more store down the road, and we have an historic shotgun in the front window. Homecoming Day was Saturday. It included a pie eating contest with some rather delicious-looking pies being consumed by the local boys. This boy in particular took the contest very seriously. As you'll see, he has his own unique style. Of course, he appears to be quite a bit taller than the others, and maybe bending over wasn't as convenient. But he definitely has an intensity. He wants to win this thing. And so he goes with a very unique method. Let's pick that entire pie up to the delight of the audience, or perhaps not so delightful, the audience around him. Some were fascinated, others not so much. But he must have done a great job, because here he is winning his trophy as the winner of the pie eating contest. A trophy and probably a free pie. One of the interesting things that was a part of the Sesquicentennial was this brand and branding iron that was created, very difficult to make. And it was used to brand circular blocks of wood. And you see them creating one there. And when it was done, This is how it looked. This brand was handmade by Mark Overholt, a real labor of love for this Sesquicentennial celebration. Here you see the chairman of the Sesquicentennial. This is Chuck Davis, about 27 years old, later to be the police chief of Medina. And of course, the Cub Scouts were thrilled with this unique vehicle that he brought. This is the famous fountain that was in the center of Medina. This fountain was donated by Frida Schneider and her husband in the late 40s. And it was really a fountain that many people loved, not only because of the different water that would spurt out in different styles and forms from the fountain, but also at night there were colored lights that would light up the water. And in the water itself, there were large goldfish. And so people really enjoyed this fountain. And it was here until 1974, when it was torn out and replaced by the gazebo that we all know so well today. But many people ask what this fountain looked like, and so we paused on this shot to give you an idea of just how this fountain looked back in 1968. The Sesquicentennial Homecoming Parade was also on Saturday, June 29th. The colors and the birthday cake. Lots of marchers, not only from Medina, but from other places. There's the jazz band. Council President John Root of Root Company. And there's Chuck Davis, the chairman of the Sesquicentennial, and some more of the JCs that were part of the lead group that did the whole programming. This jail was part of the beard growing contest that was in Medina. You either had to grow a beard or you had to have a permit that you paid for that showed you had the right to shave. So if you had a shaving permit, you were fine. If you didn't, like the man that was just put in, you got arrested until someone came and paid your bail. That was the brand new snorkel truck that the fire department had just acquired a year or so before the Sesquicentennial in 1968. Groups from all over the county took part in this parade because it was also the 150th birthday of Medina County. Some very unique floats, a log cabin. Notice the antlers. Right after this float is a very unique vehicle. This is 1968. And this is Ohio Edison's electric car. So we go from a futuristic electric car to one of the great steam engine tractors of the past. The Rainbow Group. See the old Phoenix Bank building in the background. And like all parades, other unique things, historic baby carriages, historic Girl Scouts, early girls baseball, the Ponytail League, there was always an interest in the Native American cultures of the past. Accuracy was perhaps not as good as it could have been. This unique vehicle from Earhart. And finally, at the end of the parade, the folks of Medina, having enjoyed the event, prepare to head home. But more activities will be underway the following day out at the fairgrounds. This event featured an amazing historic car show. We don't have time to show everything, all the footage of this, but it is available. But this was an incredible display of classic cars, historic vehicles. On the infield at the fairgrounds, take a good look, son. We have a fire engine race. Gotta crank it to start it. Hop in the truck and off they go for a lap around the racetrack at the fairgrounds. Most of these vehicles are from the late teens, early 20s. The Kiwanis and other groups provided all kinds of food. This grilled chicken, steak, there's John Overholzer, were part of the food that was available on the fairgrounds. This is not the fair, this was a special event for Medina's Sesquicentennial. But of course, the many buildings in the fairgrounds were made available for use. There were all kinds of activities. There were displays. You could go inside and have other food. There had been a beard growing contest, and these are the finalists that you see here. Ray Beagle. Of course, if you have a contest, you have to have a judge, and so who better to step up than the mayor of Medina, Fred Greenwood. Of course, Greenwood Park is named for Fred. He wasn't the only judge, but certainly worth noting. There was also a costume contest. There were some amazing contests, some that had been purchased that were vintage materials, and others that had actually been made by local people as a part of this whole event. There was a balloon contest as well. Helium balloons were provided, and little tags were put on, and there was a prize for the one that went the farthest. Today we don't do that generally because of the environment, but back then it was a big part of one of the events that they had. Look at these costumes. In some cases, the whole family was decked out in some unique calico. People knew how to sew a lot back then. Some of the kids had a great time here at the fairgrounds on this Sunday afternoon. She's looking for her balloon. Other kids were ready to call it a day. This is Kay Simon, in an incredible costume, signaling to her husband, Dave, because together they were named as the winners of the Best Costume Contest. So that was Medina's Sesquicentennial. And you may say, whoa, this looks like it was back in time. And you're right. This is Medina in 1945. World War II was not yet over, but it was getting closer, and Medinians were hopeful that the war would soon end. But there was some excitement in the air other than news about the progress of the war. Medina was going to have an event very soon, a very unique event. By the way, here you're looking on to West Washington, heading out, Anderson Drug, where the Visitors Bureau is today. But you'll note on the historic 1923 lamppost, there is an advertisement. This sign reads, World Premiere at the Medina Theater. And this was going to happen on the night of April 10th, and then again on April 11th, 1945. The world premiere was of a film that was shot in Medina in the fall of 1944. It was shot by Pathé News, which was a division of the famous RKO film studio. RKO, of course, famous for films like the original King Kong. This film offers a wonderful glimpse into Medina as it was in the mid-1940s, and we felt it was most appropriate to end our video today with this film. You'll see the Pathfinder News magazine, which was a publication that was marketed to small cities and villages. This film focuses on what is good and solid about small-town life, and it featured many local people and locations to help make its point. There is a strong patriotic message in the film that is designed to boost wartime morale both to citizens at home and to American soldiers. And you can discern this intent throughout the film. The film had its world premiere right here in Medina. The Chamber of Commerce sold tickets, with all the proceeds going to the Medina Community Hospital, which had just been dedicated in October of 1944. The total amount raised by the 4 showings over 2 days was $765.91. The film you're about to see was shown all over the country in theaters around the nation, including ones in Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, Philadelphia, and even New York City. This iconic film of Medina is one of the treasures of our past, and so let us turn back the hands of time, and, as the film says, for now, let us return to one of those golden days when the air in northern Ohio is like wine.
supposed to finish these today.
But I want to write a letter first. Will you take it, please? Dear Jim, I promised your mother I would write you before the week is up. And here it is Friday. A wonderful Friday in mid-October. By tonight, I'm supposed to write a brief, draft a new will for old Ezra Potter, and do other dull legal chores. Jim, I throw all this over my shoulder to do something far more important. A letter to my favorite nephew on the other side of the earth. This is one of those golden autumn days when the air in northern Ohio is like wine. If you were here, we'd go out to Chippewa Lake and catch a mess of bass. Anyway, we'd go out and get our feet wet and worry a little about what your mother might say. I guess you've had yours wet in jungles and oceans a long way from here in the past 2 or 3 years, Jim. I don't need to tell you that there are plenty of folks in Medina, including 2 right here in this law office, that'll be mighty glad to get you back home and dried out again. I suppose I really ought to tell you some news about the old hometown. Things are much the same as ever around the public square. There's quite a good deal of hustle and bustle and a certain amount of coming and going. Halloween is only a few days off. I sense a kind of subdued excitement in the air. I see George Wheatley, Sally Short window shopping at High's jewelry store. They just might be looking at diamond rings. Medina's 2 banks still face one another across the square as they have done for half a century. School seems to be out for lunch. Our young scholars are now making their noonday pilgrimage to Tony's. Some of our young ladies are diligent about maintaining morale on the home front. The boys are beginning to drift back from the ends of the earth. We say to ourselves, when will they come home to stay? At the Kiwanis luncheon, young Charlie Samuels told us of a landing he witnessed in the Pacific. It made the war seem a little closer, but Jim, it's never very far away. We launched the bond drive that day. The ladies were there, the women who really run this town and hold us to our best. Almost everyone has a boy in the service. We're very proud of our war bond record. Medina led the state once, always goes over the top. Last Sunday, we dedicated the new Medina Community Hospital. A beautiful structure. 35 beds, the most modern equipment known to science. Jim, it's a monument to our town from this generation. It's a grand addition to our public buildings. The $100,000 Masonic Temple, built 20 years ago, with our movie theater in the auditorium. Our splendid new United States Post Office. The free library left to this town by a retired farmer. And that finest of monuments, a life of service. I am thinking of Miss Ella Canavan, teaching our little tots today as she has for nearly 50 years. I went over to the high school the other day, and who do you think I found teaching a history class? Your old friend Bub Seiler, now of the Navy. They were hearing history from one who is helping to make it. Out on the athletic field, Superintendent Spencer and Coach Sam Massey were putting the boys through some sort of commando training. I strolled on, just me and my shadow, and wandered about the town, our friendly town, past houses that were built more than a century ago by the pioneers who settled this western reserve, past the old Blake House, once a station on the Underground Railway. Paskey Episcopal Church, oldest place of worship in Medina County. And so, into the churchyard, where those who cleared the land and built the homes now sleep peacefully on the hill. And there, Jim, I picked up an arrowhead and thought of the red men who occupied this rich Ohio country before our grandsires came. Of course, you know we are Connecticut Yankees, transplanted here 5 or 6 generations ago. Your great-great-grandfather, Ezekiel Boggs, came here from Goshen, Connecticut in 1815. He was a farmer, kind of a catch-as-catch kind of lawyer, and they say a mighty fine shot with the rifle. It was a long and weary journey here, creeping through the great forest with their ox carts. But they were men and women of courage, seeking a new and better world. They stopped here and built it. You and I are their heirs. This is our heritage. They too left their monuments. The courthouse where I spent so much of my life. It has stood there 100 years. Looks like it's good for another 100. So, with the Phoenix Block, rebuilt after the fire of '74, and our 2 fine newspapers, the Sentinel and the Gazette. The American Hotel, where the stagecoaches used to stop. The Root Company. Now there's a chapter in the romance of industry. Back in 1865, a jeweler named A.I. Root got inquisitive about a swarm of bees. He ran that swarm into $1 million business in the bee supplies. Today, his boys run it. The eldest is over 80, and like his father before him, a most respected leader of our town. Today, Medina has new industries. The Dolly Madison Pickle Works. The Permol plant, newest and biggest. They had to build a trailer camp to accommodate the workers. But the old town still retains its New England flavor. Some folks worry for fear we're changing, but Jim, I can't see that we're changing much. We've got new pavement around the square. We've got plans for some new buildings. Still, it looks like the same old town I've known all my life. A little bigger and busier maybe, but a country town. As American as green corn and pumpkin pie. We're having a little boom now. When it's over, I think a lot of these trailer folks will go back home. The ones who stay will build homes for themselves, as newcomers to Medina always have done. I was talking about this with Ed Gibbs and Sam Brainerd down at the corners, at the very crossroads that put Medina here. There's the road north, south, the road east and west, with traffic streaming past just as it has for 100 years. Ox carts, farmers' rigs grinding through the mud, Democrat wagons, and the Surrey with a fringe on top. And today, automobiles and trucks, and all it takes to serve them. Gasoline, tires, spare parts. Medina lives by the road, and practically every auto manufacturer in America has an agency here, and some of the wealth of the road rubs off on Medina. Always has, and always will. I said as much to Ed and Sam as we stood there thinking about our town. But Ed said that in a way Medina is a great crossroads general store where the farmers of Medina County come to swap their grain for flour and their potatoes for shoes. The farmers are prosperous, so Medina is prosperous with maybe 100 stores, places of business, including the enormous farmers' exchanges. Not one, but 2, where a farmer can go and buy whatever he needs, from a mousetrap to a combine, from paint for his barn to a harness for his horse. But Sam said, no, Medina's much more than that. It's an emporium of the Western world, he said, and its standards are established by its women. Like all small-town women, they have pride in their homes, pride in their person. They read, they keep up with the times. They know brands. They're what is known as discriminating buyers. And a Medina merchant will tell you, he said, that they know just what they want, whether it's the young girl buying goods for a party dress or the matron buying a toothbrush at the drugstore. And what's more, they're used to having their service with a smile. Sam didn't come right out and call them fussy, but I notice if they can't get the right brand of coffee or crispy crunchies or puppy biscuits, they want to know the reason why. We men are more easily pleased. So long as we can get a shirt now and then or a pair of socks, we don't complain. But Jim, lately you take what you can get. Anyway, we did some very pleasant philosophizing about our town, till Ed had to go back to work. Sam and I went on a little journey out to your Uncle George's. I persuaded him he could get a piece for his paper about what an Ohio farmer expects of the post-war world. It was the kind of day that makes the town man wish he were a farmer. He's driving the tractor now, since young George left for the battlefronts. I thought the folks might be taking things a little easier, but far from it. They're raising more produce than ever. Everybody pitches in. They tell me this is true all over the country. Biggest crops in history because the farmers of America, whether in Ohio or Georgia or California, now have to grow food for the rest of the world. Catherine gave me a jar of jam. They invited us for supper, but we couldn't stay. At the square, Mattie was waiting for me with that expectant look. You see, we had a very important engagement that evening. We were walking over to your house for dinner. We count this as one of the brightest spots on our social calendar. I spied your father at work in his garden. He does a day's work in his office, still has energy to till his acre, just as folks do all over Medina and in 17,000 Medinas throughout America. Your mother is just as busy. She does all her own work now, and the cleaning, the cooking, the canning, and still finds time for Red Cross and church work and a dozen other enterprises. In other words, she's much like millions of other mothers who live in the little hometowns of America. Call them Medina or Pleasantville. Crossroad towns, river towns, industrial towns, Main Street towns. Add up all the folks of all these towns, and you get about 50 million people. That's a big slice of America. But the hometown folks represent more than half in their contribution to the wealth and leadership of America. They've got a big stake in the country, and they know it. for they own their own homes, most of them, and home is likely to be more than a few rooms full of furniture. It's maybe an acre of land with a patch of garden and an orchard, and more tools than most city folks ever heard of. They buy everything city folks buy, and a whole lot more, because their lives are fuller and richer. Now, Jim, you must be wondering what I'm driving at, and I can see Mary Ann here is bursting with curiosity. It's that in one of your letters, you said something about trying your luck in the city when this war is over. If you do that, Jim, we'll be behind you all the way, all of us. We know you will make good, the same as other small-town boys have made good. Medina sent a governor to the state capital and a secretary of war to Washington. James Monroe, James A. Garfield, McKinley, yes, and Abraham Lincoln were small-town boys, and each of them became president of the United States. We know you will make good. But, Jim, I did tell your mother I would write you a letter kind of reminding you what the old town is like, what it stands for at this time, and what it's going to mean in this sore and troubled world. If you come back here to live, Jim, you'll never make $1 million, but you will make a good living, and you'll have a good home. You'll live among friends, folks who care about you. You'll probably want to raise a family. Medina folks usually do. They find it a good enough world to bring a family into. That's all from me, Jim. Though Mary Ann may want to add a postscript. When this thing is over, we'll be waiting for you, hoping to see you back in the old hometown.